Hello book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. Today I will be going through all the books that I read in the month of December. Alright, so we are already a little ways into the new year. I've been kind of busy with end of year content, so I haven't been able to film this video yet, or as of yet, but I'm very excited to be going through all the books that I read in the month of December. I would say it was a relatively decent month. It started out really strong and kind of fell a little bit rating wise towards the end, but still have a lot of books that I'm excited to talk about. But first I'll go through just a few stats. This month I ended up reading a total of 13 books. The total number of physical pages that I read was 2,069. I listened to a total of 33.64 hours of audiobooks. And my average rating for the month ended up being a 3.84, which was lower than I wanted. I was hoping it would be above a 4.0. That way my annual average for my ratings would be above a 4.0. Unfortunately, it didn't go that way, but it is what it is. It's still a relatively high average rating. All right, then I listed out all the genres that these could be shelved under. 6 of the books could be shelved under contemporary. 7 of them could be shelved as romance, 5 of them under fantasy, 3 under sci-fi, 1 under thriller mystery, and 1 under horror. All right, so I will go ahead and jump into the reviews. I'm once again going to be doing it based off ratings. So I'll start with the lowest ratings and work my way up. So the first grouping is going to be books that were 2.5 stars. And the first one is The Dry by Jane Harper. So I do own the physical book, but I actually ended up listening to the audiobook just because I didn't have any audiobooks lined up, and this one just happened to be available right away. I am going to be unhauling this, which is why my mom is currently reading it. She's checking it out, seeing if she likes it. But I just thought that the story was a little bit basic, which, considering I haven't read too many mysteries or thrillers, is saying something, I think, because it's not like I've read it all or anything like that. But in this story, it does take place in Australia. We have a character who moved away from his town after being accused of murdering a young female, a friend of his, and he is now coming back to town for the funeral of his best friend. His best friend's father had sent him a note saying that, hey, I know that you lied about that day and you need to be there at the funeral. His best friend is being accused of having killed his wife and his 7-year-old son, his young son, and then killing himself. So it's a pretty brutal crime that he is being accused of, but his mother is saying that she doesn't think that he was capable of such a crime. And because this area has a lot of money issues due to the extreme drought in the area, and it's a farming town, she thinks that maybe someone who he owed money to or something came to collect and ended up killing the family. So he stays around to kind of investigate to see if his friend is actually innocent. He is in law enforcement, but he's more into like financial district crimes rather than like murders. So he is teaming up with the sheriff of that town to kind of try and figure out both what happened to his friend and his family, and also to see if he can dig up any answers about the girl that he was accused of murdering, because he's innocent. I thought this was an audiobook where you would say it's good background noise. It was entertaining enough where, if you were driving or doing chores or walking through the grocery store, it kind of kept your attention. But when it came to like the final reveal of who committed the crime and why they committed the crime and all those things, it was all very basic, very predictable, nothing really interesting, nothing unheard of. And so I just felt very underwhelmed by this story. I would say that if you do like small town thrillers, especially ones that are set in towns that are struggling financially like this one is, it might be worth picking up. To me, it was just a little bit bland. The next book I read was a book on Kindle Unlimited. The author had reached out to me on Instagram to see if I would review her book, and I had some time to do so. So I picked it up. It was called For the Love of Peter Jones by Adieze Akoli. I hope I said her name right. So this is, I would consider it like a dark contemporary story. We're following a young man who at the beginning of the story loses his mother to cancer. He and his mother were incredibly close, unlike he and his father. His father never really connected to his son and was actually a recovering drug addict and was rather violent at times, especially when his mother wasn't there to calm him. She seemed to be kind of the only one that could really humanize him. And so when she died, he ends up kicking his son out of the house, not wanting anything else to do with him. And our son, Peter, ends up finding himself out on the streets. I ended up giving this a 2.5 stars. I definitely think that as a debut novel, the author did a really great job of addressing some really tough topics. She didn't shy away from some of the uglier things that happen to homeless teens or teens that are being bullied or teens that are experiencing grief and fear and uncertainty in their life, and I could really appreciate that. I think what this book really lacked was a little bit of balance. It was incredibly black and white in the good versus evil. There was the people that were just so good, they were practically saints, you know, they were like, oh, you know, let you stay at my house, let me give you free food. And then there was like the truly evil people, you know, on the other side. You know, I'm gonna beat you up for absolutely no reason. I'm going to sexually assault you. There's no on-page sexual assault in this book, but it is discussed as happening to a character, and just the way that some of the bad things that happened in this book were described, it was kind of like always the worst case scenario, and you didn't really get to experience the grayness of human nature. And I think that's just, you know, something that the author will learn to do more as she writes these darker contemporary stories. I think she had a good start. I did find the character relatively likable. I did think at times his inner dialogue was a little bit repetitive, but I did think that the writing was pretty well done. Definitely needed another edit. A lot of grammatical errors in the story, but definitely glad that I was able to read that book and give her a review, and hopefully she continues writing and improving. Now we're moving on to the 3-star reads. There's 2 of these. The first one is A Kiss for Santa by Mia Monroe. This was a short Christmas novella that I picked up kind of spontaneously. I was in the mood to read something Christmassy and someone posted about it on Instagram. I saw it was free on Kindle Unlimited, so I just snatched it up. I feel like for what it was supposed to be, it did a decent job. It was kind of a sweet, cozy Christmas romance. It was a male-male romance between Santa and a young man. One night while he was sleeping on the couch, he spotted Santa, and Santa gave him like a present or something. And ever since then, every few Christmases he'll interact with Santa, and he has fallen in love with him over that time, which I found a little unrealistic because at one point he even admitted that over like the last 5 years he's interacted with Santa for a total of like 9 minutes, and I don't see how someone could fall in love with someone within 9 minutes. I feel like his imagination is probably doing a lot of work where he spends a little bit of time interacting with Santa, and then he kind of like builds off of that interaction, and then bases his love off of that's the only thing that I can imagine, because falling in love with someone within 9 minutes over the span of 5 years is just, it's not something that happens here in the real world as far as I'm aware. But pretty much Santa is being told that if he doesn't marry by that Christmas Eve, he's gonna lose his magical abilities, and they're going to move on to his younger brother who's not at all interested in the job. And so this is kind of like a Santa Claus 2 retelling. And so he goes to find this young man, and he brings him back to his Christmas village to kind of get an idea if he would be interested in marrying him and spending the rest of his life with him. So, I mean, it's a cute story. We have two guys exploring a Christmas village and just, falling in love and things like that. It is all a little bit quick pace because they only have a few days to decide if he wants to become, Santa Claus's husband, which in this case means that he has to completely give up his life in the real world. And that includes not being able to see his family anymore. And he's really close with his parents. So I found it a little bit surprising that he would be willing to agree to such a thing, to give up his life and his family for someone that he barely knows. So once again, a little bit of that insta love that's just too much for me. So, I mean, I really mostly gave this credit for, just being cute and cozy. And the smut was decent. So middle of the road for just a simple Christmas romance. The next 3-star was an anthology that is Love After the End. This was edited by Joshua Whitehead, but there's about like 7 or so stories in here, all by different authors. These all explore queer, indigenous people, their romances, they're sci-fi based. I did enjoy quite a few of them. The 3-star is just the average. I, averaged out all the ratings that I gave all the individual stories. So if you want to check out my Goodreads, I always have it linked down below. You can check out to see which ratings I gave to each of these stories. So the one that I gave the highest rating, I think I gave it 4.5 stars, is of course the one that's hardest to pronounce. So excuse me while I attempt to sound this out. And Wanikadajagan. I gave that one a higher rating than all the others because it kind of caused me to tear up. I thought it was a very moving story. I thought the concept was very interesting. I enjoyed our character and enjoyed the ending of the story. I'm not going to go into depth about what any of these stories specifically are about since, they're each only, 20 or so pages long. So better to go into it blind. I definitely think that this is an anthology that's worth checking out if you like short stories, if you like stories by Indigenous authors, if you're wanting to, figure out some new Indigenous authors that you want to read, just getting a sampling of their writing. This is a great way to do that. I definitely know that I'm going to be checking out some of the work by some of these authors. So I'm definitely glad that I read it. I just, I say it once, I'll say it again, I'll say it till the day I die. I don't do too well with short stories, which is why this has a lower rating, but it is a collection of stories that I do highly recommend. We had one 3-star read this month, and that was Binti by Annette Okorafor. This is just a very short novella, a sci-fi. It's part of a series, so this is the first book in that short collection of novellas. I think I listened to this probably within like an hour and a half. We follow a character who is leaving her town and her planet for the first time to attend a school for mathematics. Her town does really well with numbers. I can't remember the specifics of it. It was something slightly sci-fi-ish, magical in a way. But they tend to keep to themselves. They tend to try to keep their knowledge within their village. And so she's kind of sneaking off because her family doesn't approve of her going to this university. But she really wants to expand her skills and use them towards the betterment of the world. So while she is off flying to the school, a invasion occurs of the ship by an alien species that claims that the university had stolen something important of them. So our character acts kind of as a diplomat between the school and the aliens to see if they can peacefully resolve this issue. I'm not going to say anything more because, the book is very short. But, I thought it was an interesting concept. I enjoyed our main character. I thought she handled the situation incredibly well. I did like the alien characters as well. I thought they were unique and kind of fun. However, I did give it a lower rating just because I thought that the issues were resolved a little bit too easily. I thought some things occurred that were pretty dramatic, pretty traumatic as well, and there wasn't really any consequences to those actions, which made the story somewhat unrealistic. I don't think there's many people that would so easily forgive such a terrible crime committed against them. But yeah, overall, I thought it was a decent story. I enjoyed the writing of it, and I'll definitely continue the series to see where it goes moving forward. All right, we're getting into our 4-star reads. We had 2 of those. The first one is The 100,000 Kingdoms by N.K. Jemisin. That just goes to this little green tab right here. This is the bind up. So I read the first book in the Inheritance trilogy. In the story, we follow a woman who has been summoned to the kingdom of her grandfather. She has never been to this kingdom because her mother had abdicated her right to the throne to marry her husband against her father's wishes. But her mother has now since died, as well as her father, so her grandfather is summoning her to the kingdom so that she can compete to be a possible heir to his throne. She's feeling very underprepared for this because her mother had married a man from a very poor nation that has been suffering greatly because a lot of people have cut off trade and connections with this kingdom after her mother had, in a way, betrayed the leader of the kingdom. She ends up forming a sort of alliance with these gods that are trapped within the kingdom. This kingdom worships a god of light who had many years ago killed the betrayer, one of the gods, one of the other 3 gods, and imprisoned the god of darkness, who is now, along with his children, serving the humans. I thought the concept of the story was very interesting. We have gods that are imprisoned by humans that are, relying on an alliance with a young human girl in hopes of gaining their freedom. We have the political world that's based primarily on religious texts. We have the bloodthirstiness of the royals within this society. We have the interesting characteristics of the gods, because in a way they're somewhat human, but at the end of the day they are still gods, so they always make very interesting characters. I also really enjoyed our main female character that we were following. I thought she was a rather intelligent young woman. She was thrown into a very unfortunate situation, and I think she did a relatively good job. I thought sometimes she spent a little too much time focusing on things that weren't 100% relevant to the story, but I also understood why those things were important to her. So most of her decisions made sense based off her character. My main problem with the story was that I sometimes thought the pacing was a little bit off. Like I mentioned, I felt like the characters sometimes took detours on paths that I didn't think the story needed to take, and I felt like that caused the story to lack a certain urgency that was required for the high stakes that our character was facing. So I just wanted things to move a little bit quicker, but at the same time, this is the first book of a series, and we were going through a lot of world building, not just for the kingdom, but also for the gods, how they were created, the war that they had. as well as some past events that had occurred since the war. So we were, jumping back and forth in time throughout the story, and I think that now that we've kind of got that world building out of the way, that the rest of the story will pick up a little bit, hopefully. But once again, I really enjoyed N.K. Jemisin's characters, her plot line, and her writing. The second 4-star that I gave out was for Monstrous, Volume 7. When I got this book, I was hooplying about how it's the final book in the series and I'll finally be able to go ahead and complete that. However, upon finishing this, I realized that it is most definitely not the end of the series. There will be at least one more. Goodreads doesn't mention it at all, which is why I figured this was the last one. It was a little disappointing that it didn't end, but at the same time, I'm glad they're not rushing it because I don't think they could have completed everything that was going on in the series within just this one comic. I always struggle to talk about what this is about. Pretty much we follow this woman here who has within her this old god. Her ancestors have carried this god dormant within them, and now something has awoken him. Throughout the story, we see as different parties clash and try to put themselves into positions of power as they maneuver and make alliances, break alliances, and attack different groups. It is a pretty brutal series. There's a lot of death and, we see a lot of the negative impacts of war within this. Our character, she has formed alliances throughout this story, and we kind of see as she gets to know herself a little bit more, gets to know her past a little bit more, as she learns to kind of put her trust not only in herself but in others. I've really enjoyed the character growth that we've seen in her, and we did see a bit more of that in this. She wasn't as relevant of a character in this story because she was kind of indisposed, I guess you could say. But we did get to see a little bit more of a little fox girl, who's a character I really enjoy. We just got a few more explanations about why certain people were making certain decisions, and I found that aspect of the story very interesting because it was something I was wondering about. So we did get some good answers in the story, but it definitely left off a cliffhanger, and seeing as I have no idea when the next book is coming out, I am definitely a little bit bummed about that. The next 5 books are actually the first 5 books that I read this month, and they are all 4.5 stars. That's what I meant by it started out really strong. We had a bunch of almost 5 stars at the beginning, and then things dipped a little bit, and everything except my one 5-star read ended up being lower rated. But for the first book that I read this month, and the first 4.5 star, we have Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. This is a part of her STEM romance companions. We once again have a woman who is working in the scientific field. We are following B, and she has been kind of feeling like she's in a rut when it comes to her career. She decided to give up a good opportunity after she had a bad breakup or was cheated on by her fiance, and ended up in a position where she just feels like she's not able to do as important work as she's hoping to do. But one day she gets approved to be a co-lead on a program that is for NASA. In this program, she will be able to work on the helmets that the astronauts are wearing. She is like a neurologist or something. She does something with the brain, and these helmets are supposed to help the astronauts be able to make decisions more quickly, I think, under strenuous situations, things like that. I don't fully understand it, but pretty much this is a wonderful opportunity for her, and so she shows up there and realizes that the other co-lead is actually someone from her college days who she saw kind of as a nemesis, someone who kind of treated her very coldly and didn't want to work on her with projects back then. So she's not very happy that she's working on a project with him in the present because she's worried that he's not going to, respect her opinion, that he kind of looks down on her, doesn't see her as a big a scientist as he is. When she first gets there, there's some things that are going a little bit wrong. She's not being invited to certain meetings, her equipment is not arriving, and she thinks that it's his fault, and that he is trying to kind of stalemate her from being able to do her job. Throughout the story, we kind of watch the two of them as they try to work on this program to keep this program alive, despite the fact that other forces are working against them. As with all Ali Hazelwood stories, I really enjoyed the banter between these characters. I also enjoyed her writing. I really enjoy the humor that she uses. I think that her characters are, honestly just kind of adorable. It was a little bit similar to the first book, and I think it relied a little bit too heavily on miscommunication, which is why I couldn't give this a full 5 stars. But at the end of the day, I just had so much fun with the story. It had me laughing, it had me smiling, it had me rooting for our characters. I liked the discussions it had about women that are in STEM and, the battles that they need to face in order to be seen as equals to their male counterparts. So once again, really enjoyed those discussions that she was having, and loved the romance, of course, and look forward to reading more of the author's work. The next book we have is The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. This is a poetry or slam poetry book that I listened to as an audiobook, which I highly recommend. I think the narrator did a wonderful job. It just added another layer of emotion to this story and just really allowed me to connect with the character and what she was going through. We were following a young woman who is being raised by a very religious mother, and she's just having some questions about her religion, and the rules that her mother is putting in place because of that, especially when she meets a young boy that she has strong feelings for. We follow her as she writes about her day-to-day experience in her neighborhood, at her school, with this boy, her relationship with her mother, also her relationship with her twin brother. I just thought that it was a very powerful story, that the writing was really incredible. I really enjoyed the storyline and the discussions that the author had about, parental expectations, and the pressure and the harm that it can do to the children that it is being placed on. So a really great story, really glad that I pulled that punishment prompt, so I had to read poetry and was able to enjoy this story. The next book I rated 4.5 stars is Uprooted by Naomi Novik. This is my second book that I've read from her. If you've seen my top 10 books of the year, you will have seen Spinning Silver on there. In this book, I believe it's more Beauty and the Beast based. We have a young woman who is living in a town that is on the edge of a magical force that is constantly trying to encroach onto their village. There is a wizard that kind of rules over their part of the land, and he makes sure that the forest doesn't move forward. Every 10 years, he comes and has a different woman come out to his tower and live with him for the next 10 years to kind of take care of his tower and, keep him company, I guess. And usually it's the most talented, the most beautiful woman who is selected. So everyone thinks that it's going to be our main character's best friend. However, when the wizard shows up, he reluctantly selects our main character instead. We follow them as our character kind of gets to know the dragon, that's what he's called, and starts to realize that he's not as dangerous as he used to be. So she starts to kind of exert her opinions a little bit more throughout the story, specifically when it comes to trying to find a way to destroy this dark forest that has taken so many villages and continues to take so many lives, especially when her best friend Cassia is one of those lives that is taken. Our character decides that enough is enough, and she sets out on a journey to find a way to destroy the forest, and hopefully finally bring some peace to her kingdom. This is another story with a wonderful, strong female lead who is taking initiative to get things done. She's very stubborn. She's not like the most intelligent woman. She doesn't always know what's going on, and sometimes she stumbles and is going around completely blind, but she's always trying her best, and she's always doing what is necessary to help those around her, and to achieve her goals. She's not someone who quits. She's not someone who lets the failures prevent her from moving forward. She gets up and she just dusts herself off and keeps going. And watching her as she kind of gathers a crew of people around her that can help her with her goal was a lot of fun. We do get to see her relationship with the dragon. We also get to see her relationship with Cassia, which I really enjoyed seeing that female relationship between that friendship between the two of them. There is a slight romance in here, but it's not too heavy-handed, which is something I like about Naomi Novik's novels. I do just like the undertone, the romantic undertone, without it being, too big a part of the story. I thought that the story behind the forest was incredibly unique and interesting, and it just added a lot more meaning behind the entire story, and I found that the ending was incredibly satisfying as well. Next, we have Work for It by Talia Hibbert. I believe this is her first male-male romance. I'm so excited to finally be reading another Talia Hibbert story. It's been quite a while since I've read one. We have one character who lives kind of in a small town. He's been living in that town for his whole life, and he works on a elderberry farm, some sort of farm, and he's kind of the lead worker there, and he's not very well beloved by the people that work for him or the people in the town. This is not because he's a bad person, but rather it was because he was born out of wedlock, and is also openly attracted to men. So we have some, homophobia and old-fashioned opinions about, not having children out of wedlock and things like that. On the other hand, we have another character who recently was betrayed by someone he had a relationship. They released some photos of them while they were having sex, and he's been struggling to have casual sexual relationships as he once enjoyed having, because he's, somewhat traumatized by, having his privacy invaded like that. So he decides to kind of escape his town for a little while, maybe get away, clear his head, and so he sees that this farm is asking for volunteers to help them pick their fruit, flowers, berries, whatever it is that they're growing. And so he ends up going to that town and meeting this worker. When I first started this book, I was worried I wouldn't like it. I wasn't a huge fan of either of the characters, especially Keynes. I'm gonna call him Key. Especially Key. He's the one who is coming to the town to kind of escape his past trauma. I just didn't find him to be a very likable character, which, isn't probably the nicest thing to say about a character who's trying to overcome trauma. But it was just kind of taking me out of the story that he was so unlikable. But eventually, as the two started to get to know each other, and as I started to get to know the characters as well, I grew incredibly attached to them and very invested in their relationship. I thought it was a very sweet relationship, and that it dealt a lot with communication, learning to open up to people, being honest, and just learning to put your trust in someone. Both of these characters just don't have a lot of experience with doing that. We have Griffin, the character that works on the farm, who has spent his entire life being looked down on by other people. And then we have Key, who has a bad relationship with his parents and was betrayed by someone he put his trust in. So just watching them kind of overcome their past to find happiness together was just a really heartwarming experience. Once again, I really enjoyed Talia Hibbard's writing. The smutty scenes were really great. The humor was well balanced with the more serious, heart-wrenching conversations that were had. I also enjoyed the side characters in the story. I thought that they added a lot to the story, and it just, solidified my love for Talia Hibbert, and I'm definitely looking forward to reading more of her work. All right, our second to last book and the last 4.5 star rated book, we have We Free the Stars by Hafsa Fazal. This is the second and last book to the We Hunt the Flame duology. I don't know if that's what the duology is called, but the first book is called We Hunt the Flame. This book I was incredibly surprised by. I was not a huge fan of book one. It was very middle of the road for me. The pacing just wasn't doing it. But the ending was enough for me to go ahead and check out book two, and boy, am I glad that I did, because this is such a fun story. I had a ton of fun with the much quicker pace that the author was providing us. There was a lot going on. People were going in different directions. There was a lot of different plot points that were being addressed in the story. I once again really loved the characters. That was one of the things I did enjoy about the first book, but just grew to love them even more in book two. I think that the author did a wonderful job with her relationship building, and I also really enjoyed the ending of the story. I thought it was incredibly satisfying. The audiobook experience was really wonderful as well. I think that added a lot to the story for me. I did enjoy the two narrators that were voicing our characters. And overall, I was so pleasantly surprised and had a lot of fun with this story. It was also rather emotional. I was incredibly invested in everything that everyone was going through, and I'm really glad that the story was able to turn itself around from going to a middle of the road book to something that is definitely very memorable. All right, guys, we are on to our last book. I don't have too much to say about it because it's a picture book, and that is Prince and Knight. This is written by Daniel Heck, and the pictures are by Stevie Lewis. This is just a quick children's book that I got for Christmas from Amy at A Star Reads, and I decided to just pick this up because I knew it would take me about 5 minutes to read. And it's just about a prince whose parents are like, hey, you're coming to an age where you need to, find a partner to rule the kingdom with. And they start presenting a lot of women to him, and he's just not interested in any of these women. And one day he stumbles across a knight and finds that he is indeed very interested in this knight. So this is just a cute little queer children's picture book. It was just so sweet and heartwarming that I actually ended up tearing up towards the end. Just tears of joy, not something I experience very often, but definitely experienced in this book. I definitely think it should be part of every kid's book collection, and I'm just glad to see that books like this are being created. All right, guys, so those are the 13 books that I read in December. Let me know down below what your least favorite book was and what your favorite book of the month was. My favorite was, of course, Prince and Knight, and my least favorite I think would have to be The Dry. Thank you as always for supporting my channel by watching my videos, and I hope to see you guys next time. Bye!